Dr. Clarke, joining you from my home in Colombo, Sri Lanka. I'm delighted to welcome all of you to the 2006 Arthur C. Clarke Lecture and Awards program, arranged by the Arthur C. Clarke Foundation. I want to extend a special welcome to my old friend Walter Cronkite, who receives our Lifetime Achievement Award. Walter has long been called the most trusted man in America, with good reason. It's been my pleasure and privilege to have known him for over half a century and to have worked with him during the heady days of the Apollo moon landings. As you know, Walter's illustrious 2 decades presented CBS News Evening News coincided with some of the most momentous events in American and world history of the 20th century. To name just a few: the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Kennedy assassination, the Vietnam War, the moon landings, and the Watergate crisis. However, I think in the long perspective of history, the single most important of all these events will be Apollo 11's first moon landing in July 1969. It was truly a moment when time stood still, the first time that our species landed on another celestial body. As I said then, the real historical significance of that event will not be appreciated for a long time to come. I had great fun sharing those moments with Walter and Wally Schirra in the CBS studios. It was the experience of a lifetime, with its trips to Cape Kennedy, the excitement of the launch, the long sessions in the New York studio waiting to go on the air at the critical moments. The whole thing was supervised by the tireless and unflappable Walter Cronkite. We later came together for the television coverage of 2 subsequent missions, Apollo 12 and 15. While details are now becoming a bit hazy in my mind, I have captured the highlights in my various writings at the time. I'm sure the coverage has been safely archived for future generations. I've only just realized that Walter is actually a year older than me, so let me extend these advance greetings for the happy 90th birthday on November 4th. When Walter finally ended his long innings with the evening news in 1981, he told his audience, "Old anchormen, you see, don't fade away. They just keep coming back for more." And in the past 25 years, we've been enriched by his many and varied endeavors, including, I'm happy to say, a whole documentary about 2001 in the TV series of great books that he hosted. Before turning to our next award winner, let me tell you a little story. The day after Apollo 11 launch on 17 July 1969, the New York Times printed one of its best known and much belated corrections. It was an apology to the American rocket pioneer Robert Goddard. In January 1920, in an editorial page, the Times had dismissed the notion that a rocket could function in a vacuum and ridiculed the ideas and experiments of Goddard. The correction later said, "It is now definitely established that a rocket can function in a vacuum as well as in air. The Times regrets the error." Well, now some decades later, the apology came. This reminds me of the time, less than a century ago, when our conquest of space began with the daring experiments of a few rocket pioneers. They were our pathfinders to the final frontier, paths that governments were later to follow with far greater resources. And as such a space pathfinder of the 21st century that we have today in Bob Bigelow. He's been presented the Arthur C. Clarke Innovation Award for his work in the development of space habitats. With the successful Russian launch of Bigelow's Aerospace's Genesis 1 a few months ago, Bob is leading the way to private sector individuals willing to advance space exploration with minimal reliance on government programs. Bob firmly believes in bringing space closer to people's lives, and Genesis 1 represents the first step in expandable habitats suited for industrial, commercial, and recreational purposes. And if Bob sometimes finds his efforts are not fully appreciated, I can only urge him to persist regardless. All true pioneers have had to contend with skeptics and cynics. Remember, you're in the exalted company of Robert Goddard, and you're going back to the time when space actually began with enthusiasts who staked their reputations and personal fortunes in this great endeavor. In saluting Bob Bigelow, let me offer a small commercial. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for their support of the Clarke Awards and Lecture. They are Intelsat, SES American, World Space, and the David DiMatteo family. As a not-for-profit foundation, we rely on the generosity of sponsors like yourselves to pursue our missions, and I thank you very much. Now for some other news before we wind up. The past year saw the establishment of a new Clarke Challenge, funded annually by SES Americom. I'm happy to report that nearly 24 top college students have applied for the Challenge Award, and I'm told that the selection process will begin shortly, and I wish them all good luck. And Tedson Myers and Scott Chase have kept me updated on the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Imagination and Opportunity being planned for Las Vegas, with the participation of the University of Nevada. I want especially to thank the UNLV members present tonight for their ongoing support and ask that they continue to move forward with this initiative. Finally, I want to thank all the board members of the Clarke Foundation who have given so generously of their time and talents to put this program together. I hope you will all have an enjoyable evening and look forward to hearing about it. Walter and Bob, I only wish that I could be there tonight with you. Congratulations on your achievements, and may you continue to pursue your missions on Earth and in space. This is Arthur Clarke saying thank you and good night from Sri Lanka.